The Book of Enoch, also known as 1 Enoch, is an ancient Hebrew apocalyptic religious text ascribed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. Enoch contains unique material on the origins of demons and Nephilim, why some angels fell from heaven, an explanation of why the Genesis flood was morally necessary, and prophetic exposition of the thousand-year reign of the Messiah. The older sections of the text are estimated to date from about 300 to 200 BCE, and the latest part probably to 100 BCE. Various Aramaic fragments found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, as well as Greek and Latin fragments, are proof that the Book of Enoch was known by Jews and early Near Eastern Christians. Authors of the New Testament were also familiar with some content of this story. A short section of 1 Enoch, chapter 1, verse 9, is cited in the New Testament epistle of Jude in chapter 1, verses 14 through 15, and is attributed there to Enoch, the seventh from Adam. While the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church consider the Book of Enoch as canonical, other Christian groups regard it as non-canonical or non-inspired. It is today wholly extant only in the Ethiopian Ge'ez language. For this and other reasons, the traditional Ethiopian belief is that the original language of the work was Ge'ez, whereas modern scholars argue that it was first written in either Aramaic or Hebrew, the languages first used for Jewish text. However, no Hebrew version is known to have survived. Although evidently widely known during the development of the Hebrew Bible canon, 1 Enoch was excluded from the formal canon of the Tanakh, the canon of the Septuagint, and subsequently from the writings known as the Deuterocanon. One possible reason for Jewish rejection of the book might be the textual nature of several early sections of the book that make use of the material from the Torah. Detailed descriptions of fallen angels would also be a reason for rejection from the Hebrew canon at this period, as illustrated by the comments of Trypho the Jew when debating with Justin Martyr on this subject. Quote, "The utterances of God are holy, but your expositions are mere contrivances, as is plain from what has been explained by you, nay, even blasphemies, for you assert that angels sinned and revolted from God." End quote. By the 4th century, the Book of Enoch was mostly excluded from Christian biblical canons. Nevertheless, it is referenced in the New Testament. As previously mentioned, Enoch is quoted in Jude chapter 1, verses 14 through 15, quote, "And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." End quote. Compare this quote with Enoch chapter 1, verse 9, translated from the Ethiopic, quote, "And behold, he cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." End quote. It has also been posited that the first epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verses 19 through 20, and the second epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verses 4 through 5, refer to some Enochian material. In the epistle to the Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 5, Enoch is referred to directly, and that he received testimony is mentioned, which may allude to his book. There is little doubt that 1 Enoch was influential in molding New Testament doctrines about the Messiah, the Son of Man, the Messianic kingdom, demonology, the resurrection, and eschatology. The first part of the Book of Enoch describes the fall of the Watchers, the angels who fathered the angel-human hybrids called Nephilim. The remainder of the book describes Enoch's revelations and his visits to heaven in the form of travels, visions, and dreams. The book consists of 5 distinct major sections. The Book of the Watchers consists of chapters 1 through 36. The Book of Parables of Enoch, also called the Similitudes of Enoch, consists of chapters 37 through 71. The Astronomical Book, also called the Book of Heavenly Luminaries or Book of Luminaries, consists of chapters 72 through 82. The Book of Dream Visions, also called the Book of Dreams, consists of chapters 83 through 90. And the Epistle of Enoch consists of chapters 91 through 108. Most scholars believe that these 5 sections were originally independent works with different dates of composition, themselves a product of much editorial arrangement, and were only later redacted into what is now called 1 Enoch. The first section of the Book of Enoch describes the fall of the Watchers, the angels who fathered the Nephilim, and narrates the travels of Enoch in the heavens. This section is said to have been composed in the 4th or 3rd century BCE, according to Western scholars. The introduction to the Book of Enoch tells us that Enoch is, quote, a just man, whose eyes were opened by God so that he saw a vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the sons of God showed to me, and from them I heard everything. And I knew what I saw, but these things that I saw will not come to pass for this generation, but for a generation that has yet to come, end quote. It discusses God coming to earth on Mount Sinai and his host to pass judgment on mankind. It also tells us about the luminaries rising and setting in the order and in their own time and never change. Quote, observe and see how, in the winter, all the trees seem as though they had withered and shed all their leaves, except 14 trees, which do not lose their foliage, but retain the old foliage from 2 to 3 years till the new comes, end quote. The book also discusses how all things are ordained by God and take place in his own time. The sinners shall perish, and the great and the good shall live on in light, joy, and peace. Quote, and all his works go on thus from year to year forever, and all the task which they accomplish for him, and all their task change not, but according as God hath ordained, so is it done. End quote. The first section of the book depicts the interaction of the fallen angels with mankind. Shemyaza compels the other 199 fallen angels to take human wives to beget us children. Quote, and Shemyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. The names of the leaders are given as Shemyaza, their leader, Eriquil, Ramil, Kokobil, Tamil, Ramil, Daniel, Chazaquil, Baraquil, Ezel, Eramaros, Bataril, Bezalel, Ananil, Zaquil, Shamzil, Zadaril, Turiel, Yomil, and Zariel. End quote. This results in the creation of the Nephilim, or Anakim, Anak, as they are described in the book. Quote, and they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 300 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. End quote. It also discusses the teaching of humans by the fallen angels, chiefly Azazel. Quote, and Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Shemyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armoros the resolving of enchantments, Barakwil taught astrology, Kokobel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakwil the signs of the earth, Shamzil the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. End quote. Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel appealed to God to judge the inhabitants of the world and the falling angels. Uriel is then sent by God to tell Noah of the coming cataclysm and what he needs to do. Quote, then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One spoke, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, go to Noah, and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it. And now instruct him that he may escape, and his seed may be preserved for all the generations of the world. End quote. God commands Raphael to imprison Azazel. Quote, the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is Dudial, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. End quote. God gave Gabriel instructions concerning the Nephilim and the imprisonment of the fallen angels. Quote, and to Gabriel said the Lord, proceed against the biters and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication and the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth. Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. End quote. The Lord commands Michael to bind the falling angels. Quote, and the Lord said unto Michael, go, bind Shemyaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment, and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, and to the torment, and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. And whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them to the end of all generations. End quote. The second major portion of the Book of Enoch is the Book of Parables, which now constitutes 1 Enoch chapters 37 through 71. This is something of a misnomer, as the Book of Parables proper, composed of 3 parables or visions received by Enoch, really only makes up chapters 37 through 59. Chapters 60 through 71 appear to be the incorporation of another, independent source into the Book of Parables. The material in chapters 60 through 71 is primarily designated as the Book of Noah. It is sometimes labeled as portions or fragments of a Book of Noah. The Book of Parables was in its present form by the 1st century BCE. This likely indicates that both the three visions of Enoch and the Book of Noah represent older material, which has been incorporated and edited together. There are two major themes of the Book of Parables woven throughout. The first is the description of a figure, the Son of Man, the elect one, the Messiah, the righteous one, who is a divine figure who is eternally pre-existent with the Most High. This figure has been hidden from everlasting and revealed only to the elect, indicating Israel, or more likely, the faithful within Israel. This leads to the second major theme, the coming of this figure among men, which will culminate with his enthronement on the throne of the Most High, the resurrection of the dead, the judgment of the heavens and the earth, and the initiation of the age to come. Enoch 37 begins by identifying the forthcoming book of parables as the second vision of Enoch, the seventh from Adam. This connective tissue frames the foregoing book of the Watchers as Enoch's first vision. In the verses following, which introduced what is to come, however, this vision is reframed as three parables received by Enoch. Chapter 38 begins with a preface describing what will occur at the end of days. The depiction of judgment here is twofold. First, the kings and the mighty upon the earth will perish and come to an end. Second, the wicked who rejected the Lord of spirits will be driven from the face of the earth and will have nowhere to go or hide. The parables are then framed within a vision received by Enoch after he was taken to the heavens in a whirlwind. He sees the heavens and the angels in their places. Before the throne of the Lord of spirits, Enoch sees 1,000 thousands and 10,000 10,000s who never sleep, endlessly praising God. On the four sides of the throne, Enoch sees four of the archangels performing particular tasks through their voices. Saint Michael unceasingly praises the Lord of spirits. Saint Raphael endlessly praises the elect one and blesses the elect ones who are his brethren. Saint Gabriel is said to endlessly intercede for those who dwell on earth and make supplications for them. He is further identified as the leader of the powers of heaven, leading them in precisely the task of intercession. The fourth, the archangel Phanuel, is said to fight back the Satans who wish to come and accuse those who dwell on the earth. How he does this is then defined as being through repentance and hope, which he conveys through prayer to the Lord of the spirits. This gives a pattern to the understanding of worship in this period. It consists in praise offered to God Most High, praise offered to his elect one through whom the saints are made righteous and receive blessings, intercessory prayers and supplications, and prayers of repentance with hope of reconciliation. It is not difficult to see how this understanding of worship passed directly into and formed early Christian worship with the elect one identified as Jesus Christ. Throughout the book of parables, themes regarding the Messiah and of a second hypostasis of Yahweh, the God of Israel, are drawn together into one single figure from throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. Much of the remainder of the first parable focuses on the movements of celestial bodies, which will be of greater focus in the following book of luminaries. Here, however, the stars are identified not only with the angelic beings, but with the destiny of the righteous. The second parable then begins by describing the day of the Lord. On that day, the elect one will sit to judge on the throne of glory, which is the throne of the Lord of spirits himself. The result of this judgment is a transformed and renewed heavens and earth, not only the latter. Both the aforementioned rulers and possessors of the earth, The wicked spiritual powers and principalities in the heavenly places and the wicked of the earth are judged. The purification of the earth in particular makes it a blessing to man, reversing the cursed state brought about by sin. Chapter 46 then describes a parallel scene to that of Daniel 7. Enoch beholds the Ancient of Days, and with him another being like a son of man. Enoch asks who the Son of Man is, and is told by the angelic guide that he is identical to the elect one and the righteous one whom he saw previously. He is further identified as the one who has the right of the firstborn from the Lord of spirits. This single figure then is both the divine figure previously seen and this human figure now beheld with the Ancient of Days. He further has the character of the one who reveals the treasures of that which is hidden. In his judgment, he is prophesied to have victory over the rulers of the world, casting them down from their throne and casting them into Sheol, using the language of Isaiah regarding the fall of the devil in parallel. They are cast down for not extolling and praising the Son of Man, and for not acknowledging whence they had received the kingdom. This is further describing the heavenly judgment which is coming when the principalities and powers which have enslaved the nations will be cast down and destroyed by the Son of Man. Though the title Son of Man or Son of Adam points to a human nature for this being, at the same time he continues to be described in divine terms. Quote, "And at that hour the Son of Man was named in the presence of the Lord of spirits, and is named before the Ancient of Days. Even before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of the heaven were made, his name was named before the Lord of spirits. He will be a staff for the righteous, with which for them to stand and not to fall. And he will be the light of the nations and the hope of those whose hearts are troubled. All whom dwell on the earth will fall down and worship him, and they will praise and bless and celebrate with song the Lord of spirits. For this reason he has been chosen and hidden before him from before the creation of the world and forevermore." End quote. This section culminates with the first identification of the Son of Man as the Messiah, Christ, the Anointed One. The language used by Enoch regarding the Son of Man is echoed in the identification of Jesus as Messiah in the New Testament, Luke chapter 2, verse 32. Enoch presents a period of time during which human persons are able to see the fate of the wicked powers and of unrepentant sinners and find repentance themselves, even the worst of them. After the judgment, however, there is no repentance or mercy. Enoch also explicitly ties the resurrection of the dead to this day of judgment. The remainder of the second parable describes the fate of the wicked. Angels of punishment are depicted preparing a fiery pit or gorge with chains and scourges of punishment. This lake of fire is not, however, when Enoch asks, being prepared for sinners who dwell upon the earth, but for Azazel and the wicked spiritual powers, the rulers of the earth. These rebellious powers are said to have made themselves subject to Satan and to have deceived and led astray into sinfulness those who dwell upon the earth. In the final brief parable, Enoch describes what he sees as the fate of the righteous following the judgment, now free of oppression by wicked spirits and the sinners who serve them. Their life is described as eternal, not merely in the sense of being unending, but of such a quality that time cannot be numbered. This life without end is characterized by peace and justice. The latter portion of the Book of Parables, chapters 60 through 69 within the text of 1 Enoch, incorporates a Book of Noah that was already in written form by the time it was added into the Book of Enoch's text. Chapter 60 begins with the shift to Noah as the speaker in his 500th year. This transition is a bit awkward as the first verse is clearly tailored to attempt to integrate the Noah material into the book of parables. By verse 8, however, Noah clearly refers to Enoch as his grandfather, the seventh from Adam. Upon receiving a vision of the Ancient of Days enthroned and surrounded by the angelic host, Noah experiences the same kind of extreme distress experienced by the Old Testament prophets when receiving their prophetic calls. He again describes this as a near-death experience in which he dropped dead and his soul left his body for a moment. When brought back to himself by the intervention of St. Michael, Noah is told that until that day, the patience and long-suffering of God had prevailed over the wickedness of man, but that on that day that would change. Noah is then told about the coming day of judgment in terms which clearly apply more to the day of the Lord than the flood which he would experience. Here, the flood that Noah will experience himself is seen as a sort of sign or a preliminary fulfillment which assures the truth of the greater prophecy of the end of days. In preparation for that day, Noah sees the Lord of Spirits separate two beasts, Behemoth and Leviathan. Behemoth is an earth beast and is thrown into a desert waste east of paradise named Duodain. The sea beast is Leviathan, who is thrown into the abysses of the sea. The separation of the two beasts is an inversion of the Babylonian account of creation in which the dragon, representing the heavens, and that representing the earth come together and mate to create the cosmos. These two beasts are wicked spirits operating within these created elements that have been subjugated to chaos, destruction, and death. Though they as evil spirits are operative in the world until the end, it is at the end of days that they come back together in order to feed. In addition to the broad description of their character and activity, the two beasts draw directly upon ancient Near Eastern divine depictions, for example, pagan gods. Behemoth is the plural form of the Hebrew behemah, a word which means a beast, an ox, or cattle. The plural is used as a superlative so that this would be the great beast, the great ox, or the great bull. Every culture in the ancient Near East made use of this bull of heaven imagery to express the power of their gods. Female gods are frequently described as heifers, younger gods, divine sons such as Baal, as calves. The most common form of idolatry practiced by ancient Israel surrounded this bull and calf imagery. Leviathan, likewise, is an ancient demonic being derived by way of Lotan, from the Ugaritic Latanu. The name likely finds its origin in the verb to rith, related to Leviathan's traditional depiction as a seven-headed sea serpent. As a spiritual being, Leviathan is an embodiment of chaos and destruction. In the Baal myth, she is slain by Baal himself to establish order in the world. Noah then sees a vision parallel to the preceding visions of Enoch of the final judgment. The elect one is seated on the throne of the Lord of Spirits, gloried by the Lord of Spirits himself. Before this judgment, all of the dead are raised. Every human person who has ever lived is raised regardless of the means of their demise or the status of their remains. Nonetheless, the focus here of judgment is not the wicked among humanity, but the rulers and possessors of the earth. It is these principalities and powers who are the focus of judgment, not the humans whom they misled. The punishment of these latter is to share the fate ordained for the former. These are distinguished from another group of spirits which Noah sees suffering the same punishment, namely the Watchers. The Book of Enoch, in all of its parts, describes not one but multiple spiritual rebellions and a variety of evil spiritual forces with different origins for their evil. After this first vision of Noah, he beholds the state of the earth in which he dwelt in his own days, how it was corrupted and filled with wickedness. He knew that the destruction of the world he saw in his first vision was imminent, and so he cries out, seeking wisdom. He cries out not directly to God, however, but his grandfather Enoch. Here, Enoch is not only someone who was taken into the heavens and given a vision to share with humanity. Enoch is here seen to have an ongoing role as a member of the council of the Lord of Spirits which surrounds the throne. Enoch is now serving for his descendant Noah the function which the archangels served for him in his own apocalyptic journey. Like the archangels, Enoch is not a figure given some sort of special powers in his own right, but rather serves as a messenger for the Lord of Spirits. This understanding of the departed saints, already present centuries before the Christian era, would continue in the church in the understanding of various appearances of departed saints to those on earth in times of trouble and distress. The flood itself is portrayed here as God removing his restraint from the waters. More specifically, the waters are representative of chaos and destruction, have spirits of chaos and destruction associated within them. The Lord of Spirits has assigned angels over the powers of the waters to restrain them from destroying the earth. When the restraint is removed, the waters come and destroy everything on earth. God uses the waters, however, to do good. The release of the destructive force of the powers of the water punishes the spirits upon the earth, but heals the body of the earth. The unrepentant wickedness of the fallen watchers is so abhorrent that even Michael and Raphael will not intercede. For them to do so would be to take their side against the Lord of Spirits in rebellion. This is followed by another list of the leaders of the rebellious watchers, numbered at 20, with Azazel separately as a 21st. Detailed then are the secrets of knowledge that these angelic beings taught to humans in order to further their self-destruction. Notable inclusions are weapons and armor for war, the preservation of secrets in writing, abortion, and magical oaths. The covenant with Noah following the flood is here described as an oath, a pact between the Lord of Spirits and the spirits superintending the various elements of the creation to allow them to function as normal while restraining the forces of chaos and destruction until the end of days. The preservation of the world by God, then, is precisely the restraint of supernatural and human evil within the cosmos, with that restraint being relaxed as a form of judgment. Humanity is given over in judgment to its own evil devices and to those powers whom it has worshipped and obeyed. The book of Parable then concludes with Enoch ascending back to heaven to stand before the divine throne, and a parting benediction retained from when it circulated as an independent text. Four fragmentary editions of the astronomical book were found at Qumran and have been dated to the beginning of the 2nd century BCE. The fragments found in Qumran also include material not contained in the later versions of the Book of Enoch. This book contains descriptions of the movement of heavenly bodies and of the firmament, as a knowledge revealed to Enoch in his trips to heaven guided by Uriel, and it describes a solar calendar that was later described also in the Book of Jubilees, which was used by the Dead Sea sect. The use of this calendar made it impossible to celebrate the festival simultaneously with the Temple of Jerusalem. The year was composed from 364 days, divided into 4 equal seasons of 91 days each. Each season was composed of 3 equal months of 30 days, plus an extra day at the end of the 3rd month. The whole year was thus composed of exactly 52 weeks, and every calendar day occurred always on the same day of the week. Each year and each season started always on Wednesday, which was the 4th day of the creation narrated in Genesis, the day when the lights in the sky, the seasons, the days, and the years were created. It is not known how they used to reconcile this calendar with the tropical year of 365.24 days, and it is not even sure if they felt the need to adjust it. The Book of Dream Visions, containing a vision of a history of Israel all the way down to what the majority have interpreted as the Maccabean Revolt, is dated by most to Maccabean times, about 163 to 142 BCE. According to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, however, it was written before the Genesis flood. Enoch's first dream vision is related in chapters 83 and 84. In it, Enoch sees a vision of the coming flood and the destruction of all flesh for its wickedness. Enoch says that he had this dream as a youth and told it immediately to his grandfather, Malalel. In response to the dream, Enoch goes out and prays to the Lord of glory, that he will spare for himself a righteous remnant upon the earth. Enoch here directly connects the remnant with the faithful angelic host and the wicked with those who have fallen into sin, incorporating spiritual warfare into the wrath of the flood. The greater body of the Book of Dreams consists of what is known as the animal apocalypse. This is not some sort of massacre of animal life, but rather an apocalyptic vision that depicts the history of the world from beginning to end in the form of the interactions of a variety of animals, both wild and domestic. As with most apocalyptic literature, the intent here is not merely to tell the story of the world by means of an allegorical fable, but to bring together both the reality of material history and happenings within the spiritual realm in one narrative. Particularly within apocalyptic literature, history is not seen as a chain of earthly cause and effect, occasionally interrupted by divine intervention. Rather, the chain of cause and effect ripples through both the visible and invisible realms, with each affecting the other, and beings crossing over from one to the other in regular interactions. Enoch relates this vision to his son Methuselah as well. It begins with a bull who comes out of the ground and a heifer who also comes out, clearly intended to represent Adam and Eve. Their sons and descendants are then described also as bulls, including Enoch himself. It is at this time that Enoch beholds a star fall from heaven, connecting the fall of the devil to events surrounding Adam and Eve and the expulsion from paradise. This star lays hold of Cain, the black bull, and begins to operate through him. Shortly thereafter, he sees many stars fall to earth and begin to impregnate various heifers. The cows so impregnated give birth to all manner of wild, bloodthirsty beasts. This clearly represents the fall of the Watchers and the beginning of the Nephilim. The third fall of man is described later when God entrusts the wild animals representing the 70 nations to 70 shepherds with the command that their deeds in shepherding them will be recorded for later judgment. The falling angels are punished by the 7 archangels, and the flood comes, destroying wicked humanity and the Nephilim. From the bulls of Noah's sons, the nations are born. Shem begets another white bull representing Abraham, but Abraham is the last bull described in the descent of man in the animal apocalypse. Abraham, this last and unique white bull, represents the last of the type of man begun with Adam, carried through the line of Seth, ending with Noah and Shem. His son Isaac is a white calf, who gives birth to a wild boar and a white sheep, representing Edom and Israel respectively. From this point forward in the narrative, Israel and all of his descendants are depicted as sheep. God is presented from this point forward in the narrative as the Lord of the sheep, for example, the God of Israel. The Egyptians within the narrative of the animal apocalypse are portrayed as wolves, among whom the sheep were sent to pasture by the Lord. Despite the responsibility of the shepherd of Egypt and thereby the Egyptians to protect the sheep, they turned and preyed upon them. Moses is here presented as one of the sheep. Previous figures up to Abraham, and even by extension Isaac, are bulls. David and his descendants will be rams. Moses and Aaron, for that matter, are simply sheep like the others. It is the Lord himself who delivers the sheep out of Egypt. Beginning with the sin involving the golden calf and continuing through the rest of the narrative, many of the sheep are blinded. These are not blind sheep as if they were born blind, but sheep which, due to their wickedness and rebellion, have been blinded. As already mentioned, as the history of Israel continues to unfold, first Saul and then David appear as rams. Solomon, another ram, builds the temple, which is described as a low house and a high tower. The purpose of the house is sacrifice, which is here described as a wide table being spread before the Lord of the sheep. Sacrifice, then, is understood to be the Lord feeding his sheep. Saint Elias, the prophet Elijah, is a sheep whom the other sheep attempt to kill before he is brought up to Enoch in heaven to dwell with him there, connecting these two figures. As the northern and southern kingdoms are judged, Enoch is portrayed as being in heaven and interceding through prayer for the sheep below that the Lord would have mercy on them. The sheep are sent into exile, given over to the shepherds of the nations who give them over, each in turn, as the empires succeed one another to be devoured. The temple is destroyed. The rebuilding of the temple under Ezra and Nehemiah is described, but here the second temple is clearly rejected as unclean. The blinding and deafening of the sheep is continuous and ongoing until it produces a latter-day generation that is utterly unable to see and hear the Lord of the sheep. Finally, the man charged with recording the deeds of the shepherds reveals their deeds at the last day to the Lord of the sheep, and in response, he rends heaven and earth. All of the books are opened and judgment ensues, facilitated by the 7 archangels. First, the devil is judged. Then, other stars who fell, the watchers, are judged. Then, the 70 shepherds of the nations are judged. All of those judged are thrown into an abyss of fire. Once the wicked spiritual powers have been judged, the blind sheep who refuse to see and hear through wickedness receive the same fate. The image that follows is that of the new temple, the second temple having been discarded as unclean. This temple builds from the symbolism of the promised temple of Ezekiel, but associates it clearly with the Messianic age. Importantly, the house is filled not only with the righteous sheep, but also with all manner of wild animals and birds from the other nations. Coming into the house restores their sight. These are not the animals that were perfect, but the ones who did not persist in hardening themselves and so were healed. Those within this new house are then transformed. They are transformed because the Messiah is born among them, the greatest and most powerful white bull who is worshipped by all. His being born among them transforms them from sheep into white bulls themselves, like Adam and Eve, and the other humans of old. Enoch then awakes from his dream and glorified the Lord of righteousness for this second vision, then weeps at the memory of his first and the destruction of the flood. The final portion of the Book of Enoch, comprising what is generally numbered as chapters 91 through 108, is commonly referred to as the Epistle of Enoch. Though epistle, through its New Testament usage, gives the idea of a letter, these chapters are not purported to be a letter written by Enoch. Rather, they purport to be a record of Enoch's parting words to his son Methuselah and his extended family. The main body of the Epistle of Enoch consists of Enoch relating a vision to his family because he has been told he is about to ascend to the heavens. After describing the vision of the future, Enoch then applies the vision by giving counsel and direction to his family on how to live in the coming ages. The basic themes of this preaching are set out in what is now chapter 91 of 1 Enoch. Enoch calls upon his children to walk in and practice righteousness. This is particularly important because of the great wickedness present on the earth in the midst of which Enoch's children will live their lives. The text is not aimed primarily at antediluvial peoples. The judgment of wickedness in the flood will be succeeded by a second period in which wickedness will rise to a climax, eventually to be answered by a final judgment. The initial readers of the text in this form were members of this latter group, living in the latter days. The final judgment includes the resurrection of the dead, at which point the righteous will receive eternal life, and the wicked go to eternal darkness. Enoch then speaks of the entire history of the cosmos from his birth as a series of weeks, though not necessarily to indicate any particular period of time, nor to associate that period with a multiple of 7. Enoch claims to have this knowledge of history from having read the heavenly tablets, which represents a tradition found throughout the ancient Near East, most commonly expressed in the English Bible in references to the Book of Life. The first week ends with the birth of Enoch, the 7th from Adam, who is a figure of primary transitional importance. The second week ends with the first end, the flood of Noah, in which a man is saved. The third week ends with the call of Abraham, who is said to become a plant of righteousness which grows and blossoms forever. The fourth week ends with the giving of the Torah as a result of visions. At the end of the fifth week, the temple is built. In the sixth week, Israel falls into apostasy. A man ascends to heaven, Elijah, and at the end, the temple is burned to the ground, and the whole race of the chosen root is scattered to exile. The seventh week, then, is the period of time during which what would be the Book of Enoch was compiled. This period is marked by the rise of an apostate generation, all of whose deeds are apostasy. At the end of this week, the Messiah appears. The great increase in evil will be met by the end of God's long-suffering and the revelation of his wrath. There are two primary effects of this coming of the Messiah for the coming week. First, the nations give up their idols, and the gods of the nations are cast down and hurled into the fire of eternal punishment. It also represents the beginning of the resurrection of the dead, who upon their resurrection receive wisdom. The period following this, the 8th week, is the age of righteousness. This is described as a period of spiritual warfare and battle against sin. At the end of the week, those who practice righteousness receive houses within the house of the great King in glory. In the 9th week, the entire earth will be judged and sin will be put away forever. In the 10th, the heavens are judged, with judgment being executed against the watchers and the other rebellious powers of heaven. In the 9th week, the earth passes away and is reborn. In the 10th, the heaven passes away and are replaced by a new and eternal heaven of purity. After this follow weeks without end. Considering these ages to come, Enoch exhorts his children to walk through whatever their time is in righteousness. In chapters 101 and 102, Enoch invokes the all of the created order, and from it argues for greater awe, fear, and reverence for its creator expressed through obedience. He then describes the fate of the righteous and the wicked during the period in which they sleep in the grave, before the resurrection. Those who have died in righteousness will have their souls live before God until the time comes for them to awaken. Those who die in their sin, though the world may think them to have been blessed in life, will have their souls go down in Sheol and thence into chains, burning flames, and the great judgment will last for all generations forever. Though the righteous suffer many things in this life, they are not forgotten. The angels of heaven ever intercede for them, and their names are written in the tablets of heaven. The text of 1 Enoch proper then ends with a command not to alter or change or add to Enoch's writings, nor believe those who do. As previously mentioned, in some versions of the text of 1 Enoch, further material is appended to the end. In some cases, this is broken off as an appendix. In other cases, it is incorporated as chapters 105 through 108. In some cases, it is incorporated as additional verses of chapter 105. This material is clearly of a different origin than the Epistle of Enoch and does not continue the flow of that text. The Book of Enoch is not a single work of a single genre. Rather, it is a collection of ancient apocalyptic traditions transmitted for some centuries orally, then as independent written documents, and finally as one collected text. Outside of Ethiopia, 1 Enoch is not canonical. It is not read publicly in the worship of the church. On the other hand, these traditions and their written form in 1 Enoch has shaped major portions of the New Testament, such as St. Matthew's Gospel, the Johannine Corpus, the Petrine Epistles, and Jude. It is a vital part of the tradition in which the Scriptures were passed on to the Fathers. One of the questions that the archive receives on a regular basis is, why do you have a complete narration of the Book of Enoch on your channel? This is a fair question given that most people are not familiar with the Book of Enoch, much less its origin in Mesopotamian traditions and its relation to the Anunnaki. With over 5 million views to date, the archive would like to believe we have brought this ancient text to the attention of a whole new group of people seeking truth at one level or another. But for those interested in the ancient astronaut hypothesis, this text offers a detailed insight into the Anunnaki, who are one of the main pillars of said hypothesis. As James Vanderkam explains, quote, "The Enoch literature seems to offer an alternative to the form of Judaism that centers upon the Mosaic conventional law. It appeals to a myth of great evil and punishment in ancient times and calls on people to be righteous because another judgment is coming. That righteousness is apparently defined in Enoch's writings, not in the Mosaic law. In other words, the appeal here is to a much earlier time in history, before the division of nations. Was Enoch chosen to make a wider appeal than Moses, who lived after the nation of Israel had begun? There is ample reason for believing that the biblical Enoch is a reflection of Mesopotamian traditions about the seventh antediluvial king in Meteranki of Sippar, a king who was associated with the sun god and the divination. Enoch, the seventh pre-flood patriarch in the Bible, taught a solar calendar and received revelations about the future through mantic means such as symbolic dreams. John Rogerson and Philip Davies, in their work titled The Old Testament World, make the following observation, quote, "The legend of Enoch begins with the Sumerian king list. This is a list of rulers before the flood and is preserved in several forms, including Berosus. Here, one of the kings, often given as the seventh, as Enoch is in his list, is called Enmeteranki, or Enmeterana. He is generally associated with the city of Sippar, which was the home of the cult of the sun god Shamash. Moreover, in other texts, this Enmeteranki was the first to be shown by Adad and Shamash 3 techniques of divination: pouring oil on water, inspecting a liver, and the use of a cedar rod, whose function is still unclear. These were to be transmitted from generation to generation, and in fact became the property of the Guild of Baru, the major group of diviners in Babylon. These details show how the biblical portrait of Enoch may have been compiled from Enmeteranki. Each is seventh in the antediluvial list. The biblical 365 preserves the affinity to the sun, rather than the sun god, walking with God, or perhaps angels, suggests the intimacy between gods and man. The final connection links not with Enmeteronki, but with a fishman, Apkallu, with which each of the first 7 kings associated, from whom they learnt all kinds of knowledge. Enmeteronki's Apkallu, called Utu-Abzu, is mentioned in another cuneiform text, where he is said to have ascended to heaven. This last link remains provisional, but at all events, the writer of Genesis chapter 5, 21 through 24 appears to either have created Enoch as a counterpart of Enmeteronki, or, equally probably, to have alluded to an already existing Jewish tradition about Enoch, already modeled on the earlier figure. End quote. For those of you familiar with Zecharia Sitchin's work, you know that he connected even more dots. Quote, according to Sumerian chronicles of the earlier times, it was at Eridu's temple that Enki, as guardian of the secrets of all scientific knowledge, kept the Mies, tablet-like objects on which the scientific data were inscribed. One of the Sumerian texts details how the goddess Inanna, later known as Ishtar, wishing to give status to her cult center Uruk, or the biblical Erech, tricked Enki into giving her some of those divine formulas. Adapa, we find, was also nicknamed Nunmi, meaning he who can decipher the Mies. Even unto millennia later, in Assyrian times, the saying, wise as Adapa, meant that someone was exceedingly wise and knowledgeable. The wide knowledge imparted by Enki to Adapa included writing, medicine, and, according to an astronomical series of tablets, knowledge of astronomy and astrology. It is almost certain that the biblical Enoch was the equivalent of the Sumerian first priest Enmeteronki, high priest of the Mies of the bond heaven-earth, the man from the city Sippar taken heavenward to be taught the secrets of heaven and earth, of divination, and of the calendar. It was with him that the generations of astronomer priests, of keepers of secrets, began. One cannot rule out the possibility that, as in Enmeteronki and Enoch, Adapa too was the 7th in line of sages, the sages of Eridu, and thus another version of the Sumerian memory echoed in the biblical Enoch record. According to this tale, 7 wise men were trained in Eridu, Enki's city. Their epitaphs and particular knowledge varied from version to version. Reichel Barger, examining this tale in light of the Enoch traditions, was especially fascinated by the inscription on the 3rd tablet of the series of Assyrian oath incantations. In it, the name of each sage is given and his main call on fame is explained. It says thus of the 7th, Utu-Abzu, he who to heaven ascended. Citing a second such text, Borger concluded that the 7th sage, whose name combined that of Utu and Shamash with the lower world Abzu, domain of Enki, was the Assyrian Enoch. End quote. The ancient astronaut hypothesis posits that Enoch's account of the falling angels is in fact about the Anunnaki bringing kingship to man and the evils that followed. The story is also included in the Book of Genesis, albeit brief and obscured. The Book of Enoch may be one of the first iterations of mankind's rebellion against their Anunnaki rulers and/or the system of human kingship instituted by them. It is certainly worth pointing out that this rejection of the old order happened to coincide with the agricultural revolution. In the Book of Watchers, Enoch attributes civilization and its corrupting influence to the fallen angels who came down from heaven and bore children with the daughters of men known as the Nephilim. According to Enoch, the era of Nephilim was the beginning of culture as we know it today, with the introduction of the arts, cosmetics, writing, kingship, and war. It is fair to conclude that the Book of Watchers is a condemnation of this so-called civilization initiative on earth, which Enoch views as a sinister project of wayward fallen angels and unsanctioned by the Most High. As the knowledge of agriculture, writing, and architecture was introduced by the Anunnaki, it was quickly utilized as a mechanism for population control. The institutionalization of religion and monarchies made it even that much easier to restrain, restrict, and supervise the growing human population of workers. This led to an increasingly oppressive system that produced undesirable social conditions and the rise of inequality amongst peoples in the ancient world. It is certainly reasonable to posit that this may ultimately explain why the Book of Enoch was written and addressed to the weak and vulnerable lower classes in the social order who felt no respite against the relentless and cruel power of the Anunnaki-appointed kings. The Book of Enoch may represent many things in relation to the Anunnaki, but perhaps it most reflects humanity's coming of age, so to speak. As humanity proliferated and became more knowledgeable, it developed an intellectual counterbalance to the Anunnaki control apparatus. The narrative certainly establishes the concept of the Most High, or a force that is above the Watchers and Nephilim, to which they must answer.